Hi, I'm Michael McCune, and thanks for joining me. Many, if not most, of my posts are inspired by you, my readers and my viewers, based on your comments and questions. I have to admit, most of the thoughtful, intelligent questions tend to come from older conservatives. Meanwhile, most of the responses from the left usually fall back on the all-time Democrat classic, "You're just a MAGA cultist." So just for fun today, I thought I'd take a moment to explore that idea. Let's begin with the mistake liberals and Democrats keep making over and over again. They've completely misread the American people. They assume that if you support Donald Trump, you must have been brainwashed. But here's where they got it completely backwards. Americans did not follow Donald Trump. Donald Trump followed us. We already knew who we were, what we believed, and we were tired of politicians trying to reshape us. We didn't need a savior. We needed a leader who understood us, who would listen to the people and fight for the values we already held dear. I read today how Democrats just spent $20 million of your money on think tanks who are trying to figure out how to win back Americans. Again, they have it backwards. You can't win back Americans, you can only join us. They're still trying to convince us that we are the problem, that our values need to change to fit their ideals, that we should abandon capitalism for socialism, hand our country over to illegal immigrants, allow biological males to dominate women's sports, and accept censorship, inflation, and weakness as the new normal. These are losing ideas. Donald Trump didn't trick America into supporting him. Democrats pushed America away. It's common to hear liberals refer to the MAGA movement as a cult. But let's take a moment to really examine what cult-like behavior looks like and who's truly displaying it. Yes, many people support Donald Trump, but it's not blind allegiance. What draws conservatives to him is his record of following through on his campaign promises. He's held accountable by his base, and his support is rooted in policy and action. It's not a cult of personality. In fact, many Trump supporters don't personally like Trump. And for those, thankfully, wisdom prevailed, and they chose policies over personalities, and that is the very opposite of cult-like. Donald Trump didn't have to brainwash Americans for us to understand that open borders are a bad idea. And when we realize that every single income dollar paid by 99% of hardworking Americans goes to illegal aliens and welfare recipients, that is not in the best interests of American families. Trump did not have to convince us that China's arms race against America is dangerous. We know that for ourselves. He didn't have to convince us that relying on foreign adversaries for oil while we sit on some of the largest reserves in the world is insane. Any working-class American with a brain already knew that. Trump didn't have to sell us on these things. What he sold us on was that he agreed with us and promised that he would tackle these problems. However, the real question is, who convinced liberals and Democrats that these things were acceptable? Now let's contrast that with behavior of many on the left. While it's true the Democrat Party doesn't have a single charismatic leader in the same way that Trump is for conservatives, that doesn't mean cult dynamics are absent. In fact, what we're witnessing is a regime powered by an ideological machine, one that's upheld by corporate media, tech giants, and cultural institutions. Cult behavior can be identified in a variety of ways. One powerful example is when a narrative convinces people to support policies, actions, and behaviors that are actually harmful to themselves, their families, and their country. When citizens ignore open borders, mass immigration, skyrocketing inflation, rising crime, and attacks on parental rights just because the correct political tribe told them to, it's not logic driving them, it's programming. Take Joe Biden's cognitive decline. It was obvious to anyone paying attention over the past 4 years and even during his campaign. Yet millions choose to ignore it, not because they don't see it, but because they're conditioned not to acknowledge it. This kind of mass denial isn't the product of a person, but of a powerful narrative system. The programming doesn't require a leader, it just requires obedience to an ideology. Think about it. We still have Nazi groups and organizations long after the death of Adolf Hitler. It's not an individual that drives a cult. It's a narrative fueled by emotion and overactive imaginations. And here's where the projection comes in. The left accuses conservatives of what they themselves are doing. The real cult behavior is seen in blind allegiance to a narrative, no matter how disconnected from reality it becomes. In spite of what liberals would like to project, Make America Great Again is simply a slogan for awakened Americans who have been around long enough to remember how far we've fallen. We remember the good old days, and we want them back. We want our children to be able to enjoy some of the same freedoms, values, and simple joys we once did. So despite what some liberals might believe, we're not a group of cultists gathering in secret halls, wearing decoder rings and whispering hidden passwords. We're just everyday Americans who love this country and refuse to sleepwalk through its decline. However, on the flip side, if you were unable to see Joe Biden's obvious decline, ask yourself why. If you did see it and chose to support him anyway, ask yourself why. If you find yourself backing policies that are clearly harmful to you, your family, and your nation, ask yourself why. And if your default setting is to hate anything simply because it has the name Trump attached to it, ask yourself why. Because at that point, it's not you calling the shots. Someone else is pulling your strings. Those who've been pulling your strings told you that if Donald Trump were elected, they'd all be thrown in prison. So ask yourself, when none of those predictions came true, why are you still allowing yourself to be controlled by them? Those on the left love to claim that Donald Trump is ignoring the Constitution, but the biggest constitutional threat in American history wasn't Trump. It was Democrat leaders allowing unelected individuals behind the scenes to run this country because Joe Biden couldn't. And they knew it. So ask yourself, why didn't they invoke the 25th Amendment as the Constitution required them to? And now with books and exposés emerging that reveal how Democrats and the media actively work to suppress Joe Biden's decline from the public, ask yourself, why do you still follow them? If you were to ask any Trump supporter why they support him, what policies they stand for, and what campaign promises he's kept, any one of us can answer that question without hesitation. Because we've paid attention, we've seen the results, and we know what we're fighting for. If you support people like AOC, Bernie Sanders, Hakeem Jeffries, Cory Booker, Rashida Tlaib, and others, ask yourself one simple question. Can you name a single policy or campaign promise they've made and kept? If the answer is no, then it's time to admit it. You haven't joined a movement, you've been enlisted into the cult of narratives. Now, I've saved the best questions for last. Would you agree that the role of your government is to follow the will of the American people? If we can agree on that, then ask yourself, why do Democrats find it necessary to brainwash their base, lie to the public, cover up the president's obvious decline, and stir up blind hatred for Donald Trump? If Democrats and liberals are truly following the will of the American people, why not just come out and say it? Why not lay it out clearly and show Americans that you believe in what we believe in and how you're going to deliver on it? The answer is simple. Democrats have no intention of following the will of the American people. They know that what their party wants is no longer aligned with what the people want, and they're unwilling to give up their own agenda and represent the people. They never intended to close the borders. They never intended to deport illegal immigrants. They never intended to shrink government or cut spending on their pet projects. Because they run on ideals and values not aligned with most Americans, they manipulate, they divide, they stir up fear and hatred, because when you're not serving the people, the only way to win their vote is to confuse and indoctrinate them. And that's how you build a cult. Donald Trump didn't need any of that. No cult, no brainwashing, no games. He just listened. He heard what Americans were demanding. Close the border, reverse Biden's flood of illegal immigrants and send them home. Protect our sovereignty, rebuild the military, back the blue and make our streets safe again. Stand up to China. Not a single Democrat was willing to do that, only Trump. When you truly represent the will of the American people, you don't need to trick them into supporting you. You don't need to lie. You don't need to run smear campaigns. You don't need to silence opposing voices. You don't need to control the narrative. You just listen, step up, and do what the people asked. That's leadership. That's America first, and that's why we support Trump. and that's the exact opposite of cult-like. And for us old dogs, it's a nice change because we haven't had a president since Ronald Reagan who actually listened to the people. So the next time a Democrat accuses you of being in a cult, ask them this: when was the last time their leaders made campaign promises and actually kept them? Because we can list every promise Trump made and every one he has fought like hell to deliver. That's not brainwashing, that's loyalty earned through action. And if your party needed to lie, censor, indict, and rig the system just to stop one man from doing what the American people asked for, maybe it's time to stop pointing fingers and take a hard look in the mirror, because that's what cults do. I'm Michael McCune. I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching.